Hi everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts, and today I'll be showing you part 2 of the 10 cards 1 kit videos that I created using the Simon Says Stamp February 2019 card kit. So for card number 6, I'm going to ink up the background stamp that came in the kit with some Versamark ink, and then I'm going to lay this craft panel over the stamp. I cut this panel from the cardstock that came in the kit, and then I cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4. You can see that I tried to stamp this on the reverse side, but I didn't like the ink blending that I got with my walnut stain distress ink, so I just flipped the cardstock over and re-stamped it. Luckily there's 2 sides to every paper. And then, like I said, now I'm just going to add walnut stain around the edges of this panel. And you can add the embossing powder that came in the kit over the background stamp, but I honestly couldn't find it, so I just left it as is, and it gave me a ghosted tone-on-tone effect, which was what I was looking for because I wanted this to be very subtle. And then off camera, I die cut a craft heart and then a larger white heart. And then in the smaller heart, I will stamp Forever in Love with You. This was a sentiment that came in the stamp set. I did stamp the sentiment out with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then off camera I also stamped the single rose image twice onto some more craft cardstock. And I'm just heat setting it to make sure it doesn't smear as I start to color this image. VersaFine Onyx Black ink does take a while to dry, so that's why I am heat setting it. And I will color these 2 images using my Prisma colored pencils. I just love the look of colored pencils on craft cardstock. It gives you a more muted look, and I think it adds to the vintage feel of this card kit. And I got some requests to include the colored pencils that I'm using, so I will add the numbers off to the side of the screen in case you want to color the roses like I am. Unfortunately, I'm left-handed, so as I'm coloring, my hand covers a lot of the image, which is unfortunate. So I'm only going to show you part of this image being colored. I do color the second rose the exact same way. I only end up using 1 rose, but the second rose I will use for card number 10. And off camera I just fussy cut both of these images with leaving a craft border. And I color my pencils the same way I would color with my Copics, so I go from darkest to lightest. I'm adding shading where the petals overlap, and then I'm adding a lot of darker color towards the center of the bud. So I'm barely using my lighter color around that area. And now there will be a lighting change again. I'm sorry guys, I feel like I say that on every video now, but I always come home at different parts of the day, and at this point of the day the sun was setting, so the sun is going in and out of my window. But I really wanted to finish this card, and I couldn't wait till the next day. So all I'm doing is I added the same walnut stain ink around the craft card heart and then also the rose. I will pop up the craft heart with some foam tape, and then I will pop that up onto the white die cut heart. I'll also add foam tape behind the rose. The foam tape I use is from Uline. I get a lot of questions about it, so I'm going to link it below. It is a really sticky foam tape, but it's super cheap, so I would still recommend it. Just be a little bit careful with it. And then I'm just going to add glue behind the heart and glue that down to the top of my panel. And now I'm going to take the dark red thread that came in the kit, wrap that around 3 times, and then secure the ends behind the panel. And then I'm also going to create a dark red thread, wow, that rhymes, dark red thread bow, and adhere that to the area where the thread is kind of bunched together. And then of course I'm going to add a pearl to the center of the bow. I do that with all of my bows for these cards. I'm going to pop up this panel. You can see I tried to do it one time and it didn't get it straight, so I'm just trying again. Luckily it did not rip, which was surprising with that foam tape. Now I'm just adding some Wink of Stella to the rose, and that will complete card number 1. For card number 2, I wanted to create another Shabby Chic card. If you saw part 1, you would know that I created a few of these Shabby Chic cards, and I really loved how they turned out. So I wanted to create a few more. So what I did was I cut that brick pattern paper down to 4 by 5 1/4, and then I am just cutting a smaller rectangle out of some craft cardstock that came in the kit. And then to add interest to the panel, I will add the music note stamps that came in the stamp set. And I will ink it up with Versamark ink and stamp it onto the craft panel, again creating a tone-on-tone background. And I wanted to layer that cut apart with the bird on it, and I also wanted to use the bird stamp that came in the set, so I hadn't used it yet, and I felt that it matched really perfectly with that cut apart. So I stamped the bird out with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then I'm using a black detail pen to extend the branch just to make it look like it wasn't floating on the middle of the panel. And then I felt like there was too much craft showing, so I added some pink wood grain pattern paper to the bottom. And then here I made a few bows. I wanted to see if I would want to place one onto the panel. You see that I will, but in a different place that I'm putting now. And then I'm going to color this bird again with my Prisma colors. I decided to color a pink bird. Now I don't think there are hot pink birds in this world, but in my world there are, and pink's my favorite color, so I found it to be acceptable, especially since I wanted this card to be matchy-matchy. But if I were to go back, I probably would color this bird more of a natural looking color because it is such a realistic looking bird, and I don't know, the brown bird would have matched with the cut apart bird. So yeah, I would have probably changed the colors if I were to redo this card. And then I'm going to mat the cut apart and then also this panel with some black paper. I like to mat my images only when I know I'm going to be layering things on top of each other, and the mats really help them to pop out. And then I also stamp my sentiment, "You are my best friend for always," onto some black cardstock with white embossing powder. And then I cut that down to a strip. And now I'm just trying to figure out placement, so I'm going to chop down this sentiment into 3 parts. And I think that's the way I want it, so I'm going to commit and adhere the text with some art glitter glue. And you can see that black mat helps each panel pop out. Okay, and then I have my twine bow. I like it up in the corner, so I will add some art glitter glue behind it and place a block over it just to help it dry. I also placed a pearl in the center of the bow, and now I'm creating my patterned paper hearts. I've done this in a few of my cards and I really like the effect, so this time I decided to use 2 of them, and I really just use whatever scraps I have on my table. I try not to cut into a new 6x6 paper if I can. And the striped pattern paper I really enjoyed using. Okay, so I adhered my panel straight down with art glitter glue, and I decided to pop up the cut apart with some foam tape. Just to add some interest and some dimension, I will also pop up my hearts. After everything is adhered onto the brick panel, I will flip it over, add some double-sided tape, and attach that onto my 110-pound black card base. There were 3 of these card bases that came in the kit, and they're super nice. They were already pre-scored, and they're a nice heavyweight cardstock, perfect for card bases. And that will complete card number 7. Here's a close-up. For card number 8, we're going to create another pink card. Surprise, surprise. But I wanted to color this trio of roses with some hot pink colors so that it would match my card base, which I created with the dark pink cardstock that came in the kit. I did stamp these roses out with Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and I am using my Prisma colors again to color this image in. A lot of it does get cut out because, like I said, my left hand was covering the image as I was coloring it. So unfortunately, that footage was not kept in, but I will link someone who is really good at colored pencil shading and coloring down below if you're interested. And just like one of the cards from part 1, I'm going to trim off the top edge of this panel. I will also trim down the sides of this panel so that it is right next to that leaf on the right and the rosebud on the left. And I'm also going to trim this down to 5 inches. And you'll see I will end up using that striped paper, but first I'm going to stamp the sentiment from the stamp set. It says "Together Forever." I stamped it both onto some black paper and craft paper, and I will heat emboss the sentiment with white embossing powder. At this point I wasn't sure which one I would use, but of course I do end up using the black one. But once I put this onto my panel, I think it looks really pretty with the craft too. But the black really just stands out in my opinion. I'm laying my cut aparts on top of the striped paper just to see if I like that, and I do think that's cute, but I only end up using one cut apart. I did trim down that striped paper so that it fit perfectly within that white rose panel. And the striped paper I think adds a lot of interest. It was one of my favorite papers that came in the kit. I will pop up my sentiment panel, but before I do that, I found a scrap of this paper that has a border on it, and I thought that would add a nice decorative touch to the sentiment, so I added that to the top of it, and I will flip that around and add my foam tape. As usual, I'm going to mat my cut aparts with some black cardstock. I do only end up using the cut apart with the kids on it. I did like that sentiment a lot, but I just couldn't make it work. It felt that when I added it onto the rose panel, it just looked too busy. Although, now that I look at it now, it does look kind of cute. So if you want to do that, go for that. But I went a little bit more simple, and I just used 2 hearts. I created the hearts by stamping the larger one onto some craft paper and fussy cutting it, and then I cut the smaller one out of some pattern paper. I'm adding foam tape behind the cut apart, and I'm also popping up the smaller patterned heart on top of the craft heart, which is glued directly onto the striped panel. So now I'm just going to flip this panel over, add some foam tape, and pop that right onto my hot pink card base. And I really love how this card turned out. It's probably my favorite from part 2. I think it's just because of the colors. Hot pink and black is one of my favorite combinations for coloring, and that cut apart is super cute as well. Okay, card 9 was super simple to create. I off camera stamped and colored up the heart image that came in the stamp set, and I colored it with my Prisma colored pencils on craft cardstock. I end up using the exact colors that I used to color the rose for card 6, and then I just matted it onto some black cardstock, and I'm using my scissors to cut out a black border behind the heart to help it stand out. So I wanted to create a black and white themed card. I was inspired by my art history class, where we basically had to find a work of art that was inspired by love. That was the theme, but she wanted us not to find a work that had couples on it or hearts or what you would normally think of when you hear the word love. So this made me dig a little bit deeper, find the meaning of love. That sounds super cheesy, but basically I found a pottery piece that had black and white patterns on it, and I'll link it down below if you're curious to see what it looks like. It is super pretty and simple, but basically what I took from that is that love is not black and white. It's complicated, it's certainly not simple, but love is beautiful, which is what the red heart is supposed to represent, and then the background is supposed to say, but it's not black and white. So I'm sure upon first glance that's not what people think of when they see the card, but I feel that card makers are artists too, in a way that it's a way of expressing what we're feeling, and in this case I was feeling love and inspired with this card. So there is deeper meaning and thought that went into this card that unless you really pointed it out, no one would understand, which is just like an artist would do with his or her painting. So, yeah, this card isn't my favorite in terms of visual appearance, but it's definitely one of my favorites because it's special to me because it has meaning behind it. So, as I was rambling, I pretty much assembled my whole card. Right now, I'm popping up the horizontal striped panel with some foam tape, and I'm going to adhere the heart right over the vertical stripe, so it's basically crisscrossing the two stripes, which I think adds some very interesting visual appearance to the card. Even though it's really busy, your eye goes to the red heart, and because everything else is black and white. So I think this card, even though it's completely different than the other ones I created, it's an interesting piece, and I'm very proud of this one. And it was super simple to create, so there's a close-up. Okay, on to the last and final card. I'm going to start off by stamping and embossing my sentiment onto some black cardstock with white embossing powder. I chose the sentiment which reads, "I love you more each day." I think I end up using almost all the sentiments that came in the stamp set. And I'm going to be honest, this card is an all scrap card. I had no ideas left for this kit, so I just looked at what I had and just created a card with it. And I think it ends up looking pretty good, so yay. Alright, so now I'm taking a few of the strips of scraps I had left, and I'm laying them on the bottom of this craft cardstock, which I cut to 4 by 5 1/4. I'm going to adhere the two patterned papers directly onto the panel. And I will pop up my sentiment strip. Okay, and I wanted to use this cut apart and create a tag with it. So I'm just cutting off the edges of the top of the cut apart, and then I will mat it onto some black cardstock. And I felt that the craft cardstock was too plain, so I'm going to use the background stamp that came in the kit, ink it up with Versamark, and lay my panel over that, and it just adds a little bit more interest to the card. Right now I'm trying to figure out how to poke a hole through this tag because I don't have a hole punch to use, so I do end up using my needle. I don't have a lot of supplies at my apartment, so I think the only extra supply I use is the heart dies. Okay, and then I'm going to use the dark red thread to finish off the tag. I do decide to tie a bow. And you can see I'm also going to use that rose that we colored from card number 6. And I left the tails of the red thread a little bit longer. I thought that looked pretty. And then again, with my normal patterned paper hearts, I will add those to create a visual triangle with the rose, the tag, and the hearts. I will pop up the rose. I did adhere my tag directly onto the card panel. And I'm going to overlap the rose just slightly onto the tag. And then for the heart, I adhere the cream heart directly onto the panel, and then I pop up the red patterned paper heart. And then I added a pearl to the center of my bow as usual, and now I'm adding pearls to my sentiment just to bring attention to that. And that will basically complete card number 10. It was an all scrap card, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And I ran out of card bases from the kit, so this is one that I created with 110-pound Nina cardstock. And it is top folding. That will complete card 10. Now I'm going to show you all 10 cards that I created using the Simon Says Stamp February 2019 card kit. I will include the cards that I created in part 1 since I forgot to film a showcase for that video. And like I said in part 1, I ended up with a bunch of totally different looking cards. Usually with my kit videos, I end up having cards that look different separately, but as a whole, they look like they're part of the same collection. With this kit, I feel like I ended up having cards from 3 different collections because I made a few Shabby Chic cards, some vintage, and then also some edgy cards out of this kit. So I really liked the variety I got, and I'll definitely keep Simon in mind for future kit purchases. I do want to venture off into using other companies' kits. I do love Hero, and I am subscribed to their yearly subscription, so you will see videos for that company all year round, hopefully. But like I said, I want to try different things, and if you have any suggestions, leave them down below. I would love to know what you guys use and why you like using a certain company's kits. Now I'm just showing you what is left in the Simon kit. I had 5 cut aparts, a lot of the thread, and 1 6x6 pattern paper, and then obviously I have the stamp sets forever, which is great. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know which card was your favorite from part 2. I have included links to the extra supplies I've used and then also links to my social media. Go and follow me if you haven't. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when my next video will be posted. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!